Vivek Ramaswamy kills his town hall. Every time I watch him, he demonstrates how highly intelligent he is. He's always impressed me with how well prepared he is, from his body language to his vocabulary to his ability to reference to history or explain things in a way that makes you feel like this guy has all the right answers. Like a Barack Obama on steroids. He has a way of making his competition seem outdated or inexperienced by accompanying all this with confidence that makes even Trump seem compensating. When you get a chance to see the crowd's reaction, notice everyone is impressed, even PBD. But if any of you are like me and you've been fooled by a presidential candidate before, you carry with this excitement an extra eye for anything that doesn't add up. So I just want to share the roller coaster ride this town hall took me on. The first clip, I was just like the crowd, entranced in how great this all was feeling, until a moment comes when PBD asks what seems to be a ridiculous question at this point. Do you see yourself as an anti-establishment president? Vivek had just laid out the most radically anti-establishment plan I've ever heard, and I loved it. But his next question about who besides Trump was the last anti-establishment president, you see Vivek lost on how to answer for the first time I've ever seen. Struggling to answer the easiest question so far. Everyone in the audience knows the answer. PBD knows the answer. I'm betting anyone listening to this knows the answer. Yet somehow Vivek intentionally gets this answer wrong. Watch PBD's face as he watches him avoid the correct answer. The audience is stretching their necks, waiting for him to say John F. Kennedy, the president who was killed by the CIA, who has concealed evidence for 60 years, even when every president knows the public wants the truth and promises to unseal the still to this day secret documents related to his assassination. I could have probably excused Vivek for this if he hadn't earlier promised to drain the swamp in every agency except for the CIA. So after refusing to mention the last real anti-establishment president, he seems to unconsciously transition to talking about being a father and having 2 kids. The same thing we would all be worried about when considering challenging the CIA. Vivek has plenty of time to set this record straight, but I personally will be very skeptical of him honestly intending to drain the swamp if he's too afraid to take on Shrek himself.
I'll just give you some examples of how I'm going to sew those wounds over so that we can move forward as a country. Okay. So first of all, we need to restore the idea of, I alluded to this at the beginning, government that tells the truth to its citizens. Who lied about the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic? Who lied about what we knew about vaccines and the risks associated with myocarditis and the mandates and school lockdowns? Who understood the extent of pervasive government technology company relationships to be able to do through the back door what the government could not do through the front door? Who actually understood the systematic truth but suppression of a Hunter Biden corruption story on the eve of a presidential election? That you had your social media accounts locked if you dared even send in a direct message. Who wants to know the truth about January 6th? I'd like to know exactly how many federal agents were on site that day. I'm not saying it's one conclusion or another. Just give me the facts. Who wants to know the truth about where I was earlier this week? The Nashville shooters manifesto. My view is, tell us the truth. What I see in the government today, it's like the Jack Nicholson character in A Few Good Men, right? He said, you can't handle the truth. You need me on that wall. No, we don't need you on that wall. And yes, we can handle the truth. And the people who have systematically lied and broke the law while doing it, who used our money to do through the back door, fund taxpayer-funded research in Wuhan, China, for a form of research that was banned here in the United States, that's criminal. And that deserves full accountability. I'll tell you another issue, which we're tussling about right now. It's going to be a tough one to sort through. Election integrity. Okay? Many on the left say raising this question is itself a threat to democracy. Here's my truce on this issue. Single-day voting on election day. Make it a holiday. Voter IDs. Government issues IDs matched to the voter file, paper ballots. Do that deal. I will do my part as the leader of the Republican Party and the leader of this country, but to the Republican Party, to say we are done complaining about election integrity if we deliver those basics that are achievable, that should not be controversial. And so I am hopeful that what seems impossible today, think about the unbridgeable divides, we can do this. It's not complicated, it's simple, but it is hard in that it's not easy, okay? And that's what's going to take is, it's not some clever plot that we have to construct. It just takes a leader with a spine to stand up and say, we will speak the truth. We will speak the truth when it is hard. I will issue an executive order on day one, requiring the entire federal government, anybody who pressured a private actor, a company or otherwise, to do something that the government could not do on its own. We're going to at least publish it so the public can see it. Roll that log over. Let's see what crawls out. Sunlight is the first step to actual accountability, and we need accountability in order to heal as a nation. Thank you for that question, Hannibal. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Let me follow up on that. To follow up on that, you know, for you to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. So when they asked Trump, I think it was Maria Bartiromo that asked him a question saying, hey, you said you're going to drain the swamp, but you didn't do it. You hired Chris Wray. You hired this guy. You hired that guy. He says, well, looking back, I regret the hire here. Chris Christie told me about this. I didn't really know the people there. I'm a real estate guy. I'm a New York guy. This is not something I know about. So what do you say to the Republican voter that's sitting there saying, Vivek, we love the way you're coming up. Listen, we love your messaging, your passion, your youth. But why would we re-elect a person that definitely has no experience in the White House? Who are you going to hire? Who are you going to fire? You don't know these guys. Who are you going to put in the office to say, well, I'm going to fire this guy, and I'm going to bring this guy, and I'm going to bring that guy? You don't have any experience with these guys in the swamp. So what do you say to those guys that don't trust who you're going to hire? They like you. Well, you can't fix everything. How do you address that?
So look, I think I'm the best shot we got. And nobody's perfect, but I'm also going to build on the foundation laid by Trump. I actually think, let's be really clear, I think that there's a lot he didn't do that we would have wanted him to do, but I think he did more than any president in the 21st century.
That's not what I'm asking, though. That's not what I'm asking.
So how are we going to actually bring the people in, is the question.
You don't have contacts there. Okay.
Well, we're already starting, actually.
How?
So I'm starting now. I mean, we already published our list of federal judges, for example. The judges we'd appoint to the Supreme Court, the judges that will appoint to the appellate court. So what did I look at? So my view is the U.S. president already has the legal authority to fire large numbers of employees in the federal government. This tripped up Trump. This is the difference between me and Trump, actually, is I think the people around him didn't do him a service by spouting the traditional establishment orthodoxies to him. What did they say? He wanted to fire people. They said, no, you can't do it because there's these civil service protections that stop you as the president from firing employees. Well, I suggest read the law. Turns out that civil service protections only apply to firing individual civil servants. They do not apply to mass layoffs. And mass layoffs are absolutely what I am bringing to the federal bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. And so you got to have, at once, a president who is an outsider, is a CEO, understands that if somebody works for you and you can't fire them, that means they don't work for you. It means you work for them because you're responsible for what they do without any authority to change it. Me and Trump both have that. But it's a separate piece of this, which is an outsider who also has a deep understanding of the Constitution. And Hannibal asked the question. I'm grateful he read my 3 books. So if other people want to, you can check out the same thing. I understand the laws and the Constitution of this country. Many of passages from my book have been quoted in appellate court cases in the last 3 years about actually big tech censorship being suppressed government action. And so that's the combination, Patrick, that will allow me to declare independence from the managerial swamp class. That's the advisors. And then on the practical side of this, we're already starting. We've got a project led by business leaders who I've known for a long time, already recruiting for positions, not just the cabinet level. Who's running the Office of Management and Budget? Who's running the Office of Personnel Management?
Do you have specific names?
We do. We have lists that we're working down and winnowing down. Absolutely. And far earlier than Trump started.
Fine. So who are these people that are helping you process issues? I understand as a founder, CEO, we both run a company, and there's a reason why we have a board. The board's kind of helping you with the blind spots that you have. So Trump chose Christie as an advisor, right? Christie wasn't a VP, but Chris Christie is the reason why we got Chris Wray, and we're dealing with what the DOJ is doing to Trump, you know, indictment, back to back to back. Trump hired that person, right? Who's in your ear to help you pick the right people in these different positions?
It's not Chris Christie. I'll tell you that.
So,
So it's a group of people, some of whom are ex-government, many of whom, though, are really smart people who are not in government. And I have a strong bias towards that. I think it will take somebody who has a fresh perspective to actually understand who's going to be a bulldog in that role. Here's the mistake Trump made, right? You take those two positions I just mentioned, the Office of Management and Budget, that's like the CFO of the executive branch, and the Office of Personnel Management, that's like the head of HR in the executive branch. You know, a lot of presidents make the mistake of putting in people in those roles who are mediators. They're almost like ambassadors for the administrative state back to the US president. I don't want an ambassador for the administrative state. I don't want a mediator. I want a bulldog who is going in there with a fundamentally anti-government bias to see through my directive, to fire large numbers of employees and shut down agencies that shouldn't exist. Now, here's the twist in that. We will get sued when we do this, right? People who are fired are going to say, no, we're going to sue you, we're going to take you to court. This is good. Because the current Supreme Court, which I've studied, which I give Trump credit for, he gave us a great Supreme Court. The justices I filtered for also fit the same description. They agree with me on this 6-3. So what do we do then? Then we win. Now we're driving real long-term change because the next president who comes after me won't have his hands tied in the same way. And so, yes, I think it is a unique combination of somebody who is an outsider, who has been an entrepreneur or an executive or somebody who has led major businesses, created thousands of jobs, but also somebody who has a constitutional depth to be able to act with conviction without what the managerial class tells them. And that's what gives me a sense of obligation to do this, Patrick.
Okay, so you know what's the great thing about business? When business people negotiate, we know what's at stake, right? You're gonna get this much money, you're gonna get this, I'm gonna give up equity, you get to get an additional board seat. It's very black and white, we can do it. The government doesn't work that way. It's a lot of interesting people who look at you and they say, hey guys, this guy's just going to be here for 4 years. We'll replace him in no time. Everybody's just make him feel good and make him feel like he's special in the president. But he ain't going to do nothing. He ain't run this country. We'll run this country. We'll get him out of here in no time. That's how they view you.
You got it.
They don't view you as anybody, right?
Cute little puppet that comes along every 4 years.
So how do you, thinking from the mindset of optimism, we got this, we got a lot of smart people, and these smart people are going to come and figure this thing out, and they're good at reading people. You know how hard it is to read dark people who have different motives? There's a lot of interesting people in politics that are not loving this country the way you love this country. They want their card. The card that gets them into all these different additional benefits that, you may take away from them. You think they're going to gladly let you take that away from them?
I don't. And so that's why, and this is where a reasonable person could disagree with me on this, but I have a firm conviction in this. That is why we're not coming with the chisel, we're coming with the chainsaw. Because there's no way we could ever manage to. That's a false hubris to think we could have that knowledge. We don't. 75% headcount reduction by the end of the first term. 50% of which has to be done by the first year. You don't move fast.
75%?
Yes, 1 out of 4 will stay by the end of the first term. 50% by the end of the first year. Chainsaw model. And that's what I said. Is there's good people in the Republican Party right now. I don't view them as competitors. I view them as colleagues. Many of them, right? I'm going to need them in different roles. But they make the promise of reform. It is a false promise. They don't know it's a false promise. They don't think they're lying. But it's a false promise because reform is impossible. You cannot tame that beast. It is the Leviathan. You cannot tame that beast. You have to slay the beast. You have to shut it down. And so that's, again, the choice in this GOP primary is very simple. Do you want reform or do you want revolution? I stand on the side of revolution. I know that is scary to some people. It need not be, because you know what really is scary? The status quo. And we're not going to change the scary status quo unless we're willing to embrace the model of the phoenix. Will there be some cost to this? Is it going to be all hunky-dory at each step? No. But it is better than the alternative, which is the hollowed-out husk of a constitutional republic whose stagnation economically is destined to continue unless we take a quantum leap. And so, no, I do not believe in incremental reform, okay? And if that's what the people of this country want, I think quietly they do. I think it's scary at first, but it doesn't have to be scary. Here's the test to use. If George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and Thomas Jefferson are walking down the streets of Washington, D.C. and see what's going on today, would they be proud or would they be appalled. I think they would be aghast at what they see in Washington, D.C. today. And the experiment they set into motion, that's actually what got us this far. So if that got us here 250 years into this ball game, you know, people say you were like ancient Rome. You're the fall of the Roman Empire. Well, you know what I say? On the bright side of that, Rome lasted for 2,000 years if you count the second half. So we're not even at the end of the first inning. And that's what it's going to take to drive actual change, is a revival, a reincarnation of those ideals of 1776. They are dead. It's not, I don't even call myself conservative sometimes, because in order to be a conservative, you have to conserve something. The thing that we are conserving is itself now long gone. We have to recreate that which actually set the whole thing into motion. So that's the way I look at it. It's on the FBI.
Would you consider yourself an anti-establishment president?
Of course. I mean, I'm like the definitional
Fantastic.
version of an
And
anti-establishment.
who's the last anti-establishment president you think we had outside of Trump?
It's been a long time. I mean, I'm tempted to say an element of Reagan was anti-establishment, but only an element, because I think he was, and I respect him, but he was prone to a sort of compromise that is a little bit of a, I respect Reagan, he's a hero, but slightly different than my orientation coming in as a true outsider in this. There was a streak that Eisenhower had towards the end of his presidency. I think it's what a part of him inside that disgusted him when he gave that farewell address on the military-industrial complex. Absolutely. But I don't know that we will have had an anti-establishment president like the one that I intend to be for this country, and I think our moment uniquely calls for it too. Because I don't think there's been a moment in American history where we've had the merger of private power and state power to together do what neither could do on its own. I think that is a uniquely now 21st century phenomenon. And so I think that the times of the country select for the kind of leader that that moment calls for.
You think there's a reason why we haven't had one for a while? You think that it's intentional? You think they know how to eliminate guys like you to not be able to compete?
I hope not.
Well, by the way, if you're talking about shutting down 75%, I'm going to eliminate this, I'm going to eliminate that. The last guy that had that kind of a plan, you know what I'm saying?
Didn't go so high.
Not too long. He was a good guy, but
we joke around about this, but you know, it was a serious conversation as a family in the stage that we're in to step into the arena that we're stepping into. This isn't, I mean, we step into the arena as an entrepreneur. This is a different arena.
No question.
And, you know, I mean, I'm a father of two sons. We think about these things very seriously. My obligation is to my two sons